One. Hey guys, I'm live today again. This time with an old family friend who's also a very successful doctor and amateur slash semi-pro professional footballer. Let's whatever we want to call it. Lewis is here to talk about his World Cup wins, a bit about medicine, and a bit about his life in GP worlds. How's it been? How are you doing today, man?
Yeah, it's not too bad. Just enjoying the weekend, enjoying a bit of
Yeah.
relaxation.
First off, I have to say, my dad says hi because it's been a while since we've all caught up, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been a while. It's been a while since I've seen him as
Yeah.
well. Missing the tournament this year.
Um, should we just give the guys a little bit of a background about who you are, where you went through university, a little bit about your story? Because I think you're a bit new on the scene when it comes to Instagram, especially with my audience.
Uh-huh, for sure. I'm sure it's mostly dentists on
Yeah,
your
almost
Instagram. So
exclusively.
yeah. So I'm born and brought up in South London, and then studied at King's College. Did biomed first of all there, and then took a year out, and then went back and did medicine. Um, when I completed my training, went straight into GP training after my
Mm.
foundation years. Qualified and planned to work as a locum for a little while, but then I got offered a very good job, and it's in the practice that I've just stayed in now. And then I recently got made a partner here, so I'm a partner in the new practice. Uh, so that's my story in terms of
Very, very
work, anyway.
quickly, yeah. So congratulations, by the way, on the new uh, role, as you would call it. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah.
Outside of the GP surgery, though, we've got a bit more going on. I mean, you're not quite semi-pro footballer. I think we would like to say that, but have you got paid?
Uh-huh. In the past, I did,
Ex
yeah, but
semi-pro,
not.
then. There we go.
Yeah, not for many years. So yeah, I mean, I've played football my
Yeah.
whole life, and it's been a massive part of my life. Um, so I've just always done it. When I went to university, it was a big part of me in university, becoming captain of football teams and playing for representative sides in university. And at that time, so when I took my year out between biomed and medicine, that's when I played semi-professionally for a little while, and that was quite interesting. It's a different world, especially as a medical
Yeah.
student going into that world. You kind of stand out a little bit, just in terms of your attitude and things.
Yeah. I can imagine probably you're probably going to be facing up against guys who are very much in the working class. Nothing that's wrong with that, but a very different section of society when you're playing
Yeah,
in those leagues. Sorry.
it was quite interesting. For example, even they called me doc from. I mean, I was a first year
Yeah.
med student, and they were calling me doc just because I was studying medicine. So it was like,
Close
to
enough.
them, it was. Yeah, exactly. It was enough. So uh, it is quite interesting. It's a different world. People work in different jobs, and you do get to meet people that had played, professional clubs and been released,
Mm.
and they're 18, 19, coming into the semi-pro world, seeing how they handle things. It's a very interesting experience, to be honest.
How different is it to a pro level career or pro level kind of the week? How's it set up for a pro club versus a semi pro club?
So the main difference is the amount of time that you have to
Yeah.
train, because people are working normal day jobs, and then typically it was meant to be that you would train on a Tuesday evening, a Thursday evening, and then you'd play on a Saturday. But what would happen through the season, you would end up with games like on a Wednesday, for example, and then you might not train on Tuesday, you might not train on Thursday if you had a Wednesday game, and you could have games on either of those evenings as well. So it's a little bit different to professionals, where they go and they train in the
Yeah.
morning, and then they have their afternoons free. You're working a full day. Or for me, I was going to med school, studying, doing my lectures, then driving over to training
Yeah,
afterwards.
library and all that. Somewhere, and you got to eat. Maybe at some point during the
Yeah.
day. So yeah, I can imagine it's quite difficult to keep it all balanced. Was that kind of a struggle? And is that what was the reasons maybe that made you stop in the end?
I mean, it wasn't too bad balancing it for me, partly because I'd done biomed
Mm,
already. And when I did that, I knew that I was going to do
right.
medicine. So I structured my course choices so it was essentially repeating the first 2 years of medicine. So when I was doing medicine, the first 2 years weren't particularly hard study wise. And so I could perhaps slack off a little bit and go and, you know, do my training and play. Partly why I stopped is it's a very different world, and you get, you know, a lot of managers will play the players that they like, and they'll play. For example, I had a manager. He had a son and a stepson, and he played both of them no matter what happened.
Right.
You know, and then he had an assistant who also had a son, and he played him too. So it was kind of, you competed against things like that, people playing their friends and their favorites, and then I just decided I wanted to go back to uni football and enjoy myself a little
Yeah, and
bit.
you had quite a bit of success in the uni football teams, didn't you? Because I remember you saying you guys got to like, is it the London Medical Schools finals or something? Was that thing?
Yeah, so it is a thing. So we have a thing called the UH
Yeah.
Cup, which is the United Hospitals Cup, and it's one of the oldest running competitions in the country. And we used to play in that every year, and it's all the London medical schools play against each other. And yeah, had quite a bit of success playing for GKT, and we won it once, reached the final a couple of times, but sadly lost.
Mm.
Um,
What's
yeah.
the standard like?
In
Yeah.
uni football, it can really vary. I mean, you know, for example, if you go to the top league in the University of London, it was quite a high standard, and you had places when I was playing like Royal Holloway, and they had two or three players that had also been released from pro clubs, and you could just tell their standard was that
Yeah.
bit higher. Really good footballers. They had coaches, and then you get other unis that don't really take it so seriously, or they have a real small population to pick
Like
from.
Barts.
Um, so
Taking
Barts was
shots.
traditionally one of the. You can take shots, yeah. I mean, Barts was traditionally one of the weaker medical schools, but in the time when I was there, they ended up having a goalkeeper who
Yeah,
who
James.
played for the British medical football team, and he was exceptional. And they had two or three other players in that team, and they had a really strong spine, and they ended up being really good. And it can happen like that with university football.
Yeah.
You sometimes get a bit fortunate by getting a group of players together, and your team can
Yeah,
really
it's down
take
to
off.
the intake of the universities, and they don't normally select for football players on a medical school.
No, no, unfortunately not. Although there's rumours that, for example, Imperial select for rugby players, but
Yeah.
you know they don't tend to. Nobody selects for football players.
Yeah, no, I think there's a. Do you think there's a stigma with rugby and football down south? Like the kind of people who play?
Uh, I mean, there is a little bit. For example, in my school that I
Mm.
went to, nobody played rugby, but I think that it's more of a class difference than actually a north-south thing. I know up north you play a lot of rugby league, but down here they tend to play union
Yeah.
more. But again, that depends on the school you go
Yeah,
to.
there was definitely a thing in my school because we were a grammar school selective, and they were a bit more uppity that you weren't allowed to play
Uh-huh.
football, as in like in a games lesson or something. You wouldn't be playing football. You'd be playing rugby. It would be athletics. It would be tennis. It'd be the up, a bit more upper class sports, rowing, and all that
Oh,
that kind of
really?
thing. And
Yeah.
if you like brought football in on a games lesson, they'd give you a bit of a look like that's not what we do here.
Uh-huh. I've heard that, and it's
Yeah.
so interesting because it just, it's the complete opposite. I mean, we purely played football, and I mean, in PE they did try to introduce us to other
Yeah.
sports, and they used to split up our year, so you had to do three different sports through the year. But all the football boys used to just play football for all three sessions of the year. So you just every
Yeah.
PE lesson you just played football,
Yeah. No, I can imagine that would
and
be like that's exactly what we would have done if they'd let us. I think. I mean, rugby was fun, and all the athletics is great as well, but it's not quite the same intensity as you get when you're playing football. And maybe they were worried about us kind of fighting. I think that might have been part of it.
uh-huh. What if you played football, they'd worry about you
I think
fighting.
there's an idea within the school like hierarchy that if you let them play football, you spend most of the games lesson stopping them having fights.
Uh-huh.
I that's kind of
It's
the
interesting.
the edge that I got, like the impression that I took away from it. Like, oh, that's, that's for the guys who are working class. We don't do that here, that kind of thing. Great
Yeah,
school, but yeah, it was interesting to see how set up.
that's interesting. So I presume you obviously played rugby, but you liked football.
I looked both.
So,
I would my training back in school was insane. It was 5 days
uh,
training rugby, a game on the Saturday, and then I'd play football without training on the Sunday because I had the rugby
wow,
game on the Saturday morning. So I was I was training 7 days a week, which was
pretty
it was
good.
pretty fun. And I probably need to do that again, to be honest. Put on a few pounds.
Yeah, yeah, the lockdown
Yeah.
pounds.
How have you coped with lockdown?
Fitness wise, we.
Fitness, mentally, a lot. I mean, I bet you've been really busy.
So yes, I mean it's been a bit mixed because obviously I've been working the whole way through. Although work has changed a little bit, but it's still been fairly
Yeah.
consistent. And then it's just been a matter of you have no, especially during the first lockdown, there was no social activities at all. Football completely stopped, and so it was just transitioning to what you could do workout wise for that. It's a bit difficult because I live on my own, so when you're in lockdown and you can't meet anybody outside, you just you work and then you come to your own
Yeah.
home. But in fact, it made me a little bit grateful that I was going into work. So at least, you see receptionists, you see admin staff, you have a laugh and a joke during the day. So that was your
Socializing.
social
Yeah.
interaction. Yeah. So didn't go entirely crazy.
No, I can imagine it's quite tough. How did the actual job change for you?
So it was, I mean, it's changed a lot into now. The initial hit was that it almost hit us unexpectedly, although some of us did know that
Yeah.
it was coming. When it became clear that rates were becoming higher, we essentially just had to stop patients coming into the surgery in one day, with no real planning for what we would do, how we would then see them. So we went from, seeing each doctor seeing between 30 and 40 patients a day to suddenly saying, well, those 30 and 40 patients, how do we now deal with them? And having to do that. So we started telephone triage for
Yeah.
people. If we absolutely needed to see them, we could bring them in. Cutting it down from 40 patients coming to the surgery down to one or two,
Yeah.
and just finding ways around things like, can you do video consultations? Can you get people to send you pictures of you know lumps or bumps and do it that way, or if they've got a rash? So there's it was finding ways around it to reduce patient contact and reduce the mixing of patients with us and with each other, for example, in the
Mm.
waiting room.
Did you have to, if you had to bring someone in, was it sort of sit in the car? Can we see it from the car window? That kind of thing, or were you bringing them in the surgery?
No, so generally we'd actually bring them in. So if we needed them to come in, we would get them to
Yeah.
come into the room, because usually that would be something, for example, a patient saying, I felt a lump in my abdomen. So then you can't do that through a car window. So you would just say, come in. They essentially walk in. And we wouldn't let them sit in the waiting room. We'd
Straight
just
in.
bring them straight into the room, examine them, send them out. And then as soon as you did that, you would clean the room, have the windows open while you were consulting them, those kind
Mm.
of things that you could do to reduce your
Yeah,
risk.
fair enough. It's a balancing act, isn't it? I suppose. Um,
Yeah.
do you think you've been more effective getting through things now that you don't have everybody physically coming in, or do you think it's caused more issues than it solved? I mean, the video triage, other things that just take you 5 minutes that used to take you 15 or 20 because they had to physically come in.
So it's changed. I can't really say at the moment whether it's more efficient or less
Mm.
efficient, because sometimes you have to speak to somebody on the phone and then you have to bring them in. And also you might, so we do deal a little bit now with some assumptions. So somebody can call me with ear pain and I might be able to diagnose it over the phone, but I'm assuming because I might not examine the ear, and I have to weigh that up. What do I gain from examining the ear? Is it worth bringing the patient in? So if I give them a treatment and then it doesn't work, then I have to bring them in and
Right.
examine them, because obviously I was, barking up the wrong tree. So that's been a little bit less efficient in that way. But then also there's lots of things that I deal with over the phone, and you can you can diagnose and treat, like for example, rashes. Somebody sends a picture of a rash on their hand, and you can just do it, and the person can be at work while they do it. So it's much better for patients and for us in
Mm.
that way.
Yeah, I suppose it saves them a lot of time going to and from. So, yeah, do you
Yeah.
think it's been more calls because the barrier to getting seen is lower now? Because it's just pick up the phone as opposed to you have to come
Uh-huh.
in.
Yeah, in a way it has, but that's also gone in waves a
Right.
little bit, where so initially it was really hectic and really busy because people didn't know what was happening. And then when lockdown came and people realized this thing is massive, people just wanted to stay home, and they actually didn't want to speak to a doctor, even on the phone for some reason. People would, and you did have patient contacts. Then after lockdown relaxed, people kind of would call and say, "Oh, well, I've had this problem for 6 weeks, and there's 4 more things I want to talk about." So you had this kind of rush of increased calls, increased activity, increased problems to
Mm.
deal with, and it was like that for about 6 or 8 weeks, and then it's almost like we've dealt with that now, and it's gone to
Okay.
a stable
Yeah,
level.
so you've kind of dealt with the pent up demand, and now it's just keeping things ticking over as they should have been before.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, it sounds
yeah.
very interesting because obviously the dentists all got closed, and I'm sure
Uh-huh.
you've heard from friends who were pretty irate about the way things were done, and
Yeah,
things like that. So, um, it's interesting to see how GP surgery, although I have first-hand experience myself of what's going on, but how it's been done elsewhere as well.
yeah. It's interesting because with dentists, any procedure you were doing felt like high risk, and without the appropriate protection, you couldn't carry on really seeing patients. Whereas, for us, if somebody wore a mask, I wore a mask, and I examined their abdomen in 2 minutes, then that's not a high risk for me. So we were able to stay open
Yeah,
and see people, whereas I didn't think it was really plausible at that
not
stage
not
for you
without
guys to do it.
PPE and all these other things that you require.
Yeah,
Um, vacuuming the room, not vacuuming, changing the air in the room, all these things that um, had to be implemented. So yeah, it's a very different
yeah.
world in dentistry now. But we're not here to talk about teeth because, by the way, we're pretty bored of talking about teeth. Uh, what's your idea? What's your kind of thoughts on my profession as a whole, looking from kind of an allied profession, looking from the outside?
So, I mean, I do know quite
Yeah,
a few dentists, including
not it's not
yourself,
just me.
and although, yeah, not just you, and there's quite a lot of banter that goes on between medics and dentists, and particularly because I went to King's and when we study
Mm.
alongside each other. Um, but there's a lot of respect for what you actually do, and how skilled you are and the things you help people with, and we hold you in high esteem even if we won't tell you that. So,
You're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to come out.
oh,
I was
yeah.
thinking, shall I put this title down as medicine versus dentistry
Uh-huh.
or something like that and make it a bit of a flame war? But I didn't in the end. I had
Yeah.
a couple of other things I thought which were better to go with. Um, yeah, how have the careers of your friends gone? Because you're a couple of years you graduated before me, obviously. Um, so you've maybe seen your friends go through a number of different stages in their careers as opposed to where I am, where I'm a couple of years out.
Yeah. I mean, so it is interesting seeing, because when we first qualify, I think there's a bit of a discrepancy between sort of, you guys have 1 year and then you're earning a decent amount of money, and you are essentially in your settled
Yeah,
status. Whereas for us, we qualify and it's like we're on the bottom rung. We don't earn very much, and we've got a period of time, depending on which speciality you choose, that you work your way towards the top and progress. So that was quite interesting seeing that. When I qualified, a lot of dentists that I knew, it felt like they'd done everything already. They'd reached the pinnacle already. I know there's things that you then can go on to
yeah.
in your
It's up
career.
to the individual at that point, isn't it, to step up and improve. Where I think for you guys, you
Yeah,
have a set pathway. Oh, I want to be a
yeah,
cardiologist. Boom, that's what you do. Oh, I want to do
yeah,
GP. You've already got everything set out for you.
yeah. So I decided on GP. Sort of during my F1 year, I realized that this is probably where I wanted to go, and that meant 2 years of foundation training, 3 years of GP training, and then I was a qualified GP. And then your your perspectives change. Or you could look at the other way. You do something like orthopedics, and you're again 2 years of foundation training, and it's 8 to 10 years of then postgraduate training in the hospital to become a consultant orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah, were you not kind of the guy who wanted to be messing around with saws?
I really did. I liked orthopedics, and I really enjoyed it as a subject, and that's partly down to the sports as well. I always took an interest in it. Just seeing footballers have injuries, for example. The first notable injury I remember was Paul Gascoigne rupturing his cruciate ligament. I remember reading about it, and at that time I was only 11 years of age, and reading about the mechanism of how it happened, what a cruciate ligament was. And I found it fascinating from them. So I always had the idea maybe I would be, an orthopedic consultant, but I'd have wanted to be repairing footballers' knees, not hips.
Not hips, and yeah.
So it's not as glamorous when you actually, unless you become one of the top surgeons who then gets sent all the footballers, then that's pretty glamorous. But otherwise, it's not. And plus, I was a postgrad going into medicine, so looking at it, the years of training,
just like, no, I don't want to do more. Too many books.
Yeah, was a little bit like that, and so, and I don't, like, in hindsight, the job wouldn't have suited me. I enjoy GP, and I enjoy having a broad range of subjects that I have to know about and to learn from, and I enjoy knowing a little bit about everything.
Have you looked into sports GP? Like, that's the thing, isn't it? Sports medicine as a GP.
Yeah. So I mean, I did that, and that's part of the reason why I took this job, was because it gave me an opportunity in sports medicine. So I did my diploma in sports medicine.
I almost knocked everything over.
All right.
I was just rearranging my knees.
Yeah, it gets uncomfortable. So I did a diploma in sports medicine at Bath as a postgrad while I was working as a GP. And then I worked for Crystal Palace for a little while, and also did a couple of sessions with, for example, Leyton Orient and things where they needed a doctor, doing things at Crystal Palace, like working with the under-18s and covering those games.
Any interesting names?
It's something... Interesting names. What is interesting is that obviously I work with the first team as well at Crystal Palace, so you see players like Jason Puncheon, or these kind of... Andy Johnson was there when I was there. You had Neil Warnock as the manager, so you see all these names and the people you see on TV. So that's very interesting. Watching them train is fascinating. Seeing them physically is fascinating. How they are all athletes, and they're all really built, really muscular, and they look quite slim on TV, for example, but they're all really, really strong.
Yeah, I remember being at Carrington. Eric took me a long while ago. Rest in peace, by the way, for the guys that know. But I remember seeing Antonio Valencia, and he was the widest guy I've ever seen in person. Oh my god! Like, you're thinking, oh, Valencia, he's a standard guy. He's 6 foot, and he's 6 foot sideways as well. It was insane. Yeah, and Carrick was just towering above me. I was like, wow. Like, you wouldn't know just by watching on TV how athletic and large these guys are. Even when you're in the ground, you don't see how because you're so far away. Yeah.
I think you're far away, and it's all relative, So you look at certain players and they look quite slender, or they look thin, but actually, it's because you're comparing them to each other, and when you compare them to yourselves, it's just another world of athleticism.
What was the attitude of the coaching staff or training staff towards sports medicine? Because I've heard of certain clubs where Ferguson and Wenger, they just went hell for leather on sports medicine, late 90s, early 2000s, which is why they were so far ahead of everyone. And you used to hear things maybe about the Kirbishleys and the Warnocks of the world and Redknaps, where they didn't believe in it. Everyone had to do suicide runs all the time, all these kinds of things. Did you see that firsthand?
Yeah, I mean, so by the time I was there at Crystal Palace, for example, they had an array of different coaches. So you had your fitness coach who did all the fitness training. We had 3 or 4 physios working there. You had masseuses, and then the sports
Mm.
doctor as well. And so it was taken pretty seriously. But even then, Crystal Palace was a little bit in transition between this sort of old school where the person that I worked alongside, he was another GP, and he had the job for 16 years at Crystal Palace, and he did the same thing. He's a GP with a sports medicine diploma, was Crystal Palace main
Yeah.
doctor. But then what eventually happened with them was they decided that they wanted to be, well, they actually, because they were staying in the Premier League, they wanted to be more professional. So they wanted a full-time club doctor who that's his only job, is to be the
Right.
club doctor. And so a lot of clubs were making that transition at that time. The top clubs already, Arsenal, Man United, Chelsea, they'd already done that. But some clubs, especially the ones coming from the Championship up, were in a bit of transition in that way.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting because you hear of recovery suites and cryo chamber. Ronaldo's got a cryo chamber in his house, and all these kinds of insane
Yeah.
things. Although the ice bath therapy has been maybe put into question recently. Um,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, it's all really really fascinating. Um, so yeah, it's really interesting to hear from someone. I didn't know you'd done this, man. Otherwise, I'd have been biting your ear off years
You,
ago.
that's it. Yeah, it's an interesting
Yeah,
world, and I think for myself, ultimately, I didn't get as much reward from that as I did from my NHS work and from helping patients in the NHS and
yeah,
doing the day-to-day job. And I actually preferred that, although it was lovely to be around professional footballers and the guys you see on Match of the Day, to be treating them and looking after them. It's still more rewarding to deal
yeah.
with your
Got a
NHS
comment
patients.
from Asfia Khanum. Profession and passion both in one frame. So there we go. Is that one of your friends?
Yeah. So I mean, that's partly that's what I had thought, was that I could do
Yeah,
sports medicine because it's such a passion of mine. But also it gave me a bit of a dilemma because of, as you know, I like playing football and trying to keep playing, and I would have to have covered games during the time when I should be playing for
yeah.
a team. So it was either, do I continue down this path and dedicate my time to that and quit playing football, or do I keep playing football and stop the sports
It's the
medicine?
impossible
So,
dilemma, isn't it? Really?
yeah, just a bit. And I think, partly, talk about mental health as well in terms of COVID, but mental health wise, in terms of GP, it's having an outlet like football to focus on a little bit is great at the end of your week, where you can just forget, the 300 patients you've
Yeah,
dealt with and just think of football for 90
yeah. I
minutes.
suppose if you're a football doctor, they'll be calling you at 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. in the night, going, "Oh, I've stubbed my toe or whatever," because some of them maybe aren't quite the sharpest bunch.
Yeah.
Can't look after themselves.
You you do have to be there. Basically, you're on call
Yeah,
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's part of the job. I think in the higher clubs, it's very well rewarded for
mm.
that, financially at least. But you do have to devote your life to it.
Yeah. Are there any interesting kind of things that you can tell us, for an average Joe who likes his, fitness and stuff like that, things that you weren't aware of before you did all this sports medicine and went into football and into the clubs, that the average person can implement in their daily routines and stuff that's going to help out with keeping fit and active, things like that. There's one study from I think it was UCL or Imperial, I can't remember which one, but they improved oral health, so made the players brush their
Uh-huh.
teeth essentially, um,
Yeah.
and it improved performance by 5% over
Yeah.
2-3 year cohort. It was rugby players and rowers, uh,
Uh-huh.
mainly. Really really interesting. Is there anything like that that you're aware of?
I think, really from the point of view of medicine, it was more learning that injury prevention is the key, and there's certain things that you should do to try to prevent your risk of
Mm,
injury. So making sure that your core is strong, making sure that your glutes are strong and firing. And it's these things that, not most people, or a lot of people that might be recreational runners, for example, will go out and run and maybe do a 10K or a 5K, but they don't warm their glutes up and they don't warm their calves up. And if you don't do that, it affects your running technique, and then that puts strain on your hamstrings and on your calves. So then that leads to more
Yeah.
injuries. So that's quite an interesting aspect. And you then recommend people to do some core work, some glute activation work as part of their program, and if you just add that into running, you're less likely to be injured, more likely to keep
Yeah.
running.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the one that I was talking about was all to do with inflammation. So you
yeah,
reduce inflammation systemically, and then you're less likely to tear something over the course of a year or
yeah.
something. But there's so many things that you could go into. I think sports medicine is. You think it's like in its infancy almost as a profession.
It is a little bit, and you mentioned things like the cold baths, and there's a lot of these things that they come in and they make a big splash, and everybody's doing them, and the evidence behind them, it could be one
Mm,
study, and it takes time to figure out, does this really help or does it not, and how do you differentiate that? And you have to test it on a lot of people to do that, and then at the highest level, how do you measure the impact of a change that you
yeah.
make? And so it's constantly developing, and new therapies are coming out, new treatment avenues are coming out, and they're having to test them. So it is quite a fascinating world in that way.
Yeah, and I suppose if there are clubs that are doing these kinds of studies on their players, they're not going to release any of that information to another club or to anyone else because they want that competitive edge.
No, exactly. That's it. And because of that, it's very difficult to measure it. So if a club does find something that gives them an advantage, you're not going to hear about it, and unless somebody leaks it, and then everybody
Yeah,
will do it. You know.
I think it. Did you have you read Soccernomics? I'm sure you have.
So I read an old version
Right.
of the book, and I forget what it was called. I think it's called Why England
Yeah, before they
Lose,
changed the
and
name.
yeah. So I read it, and I think they added a few extra
Yeah.
chapters. So I had read
No,
it
because
then.
Inter Milan did exactly that. They had 20 years worth of data on all the players on injury prevention and all this like performance enhancing stuff, and then they just it's like Fort Knox. They just won't release any of the information, which is why they're generally pretty good. And they had the team full of 35-year-olds doing really well. Although there may have been something else
Yeah,
going on there. Who knows? Uh,
you never know. I mean, it's hard to tell with the dark side of
yeah, yeah,
things. How prevalent that is, and working in sports medicine, I've never seen it and never seen anything like that. But you just don't know. It's certain clubs, what's
yeah.
happening.
They tend to send them to Barcelona, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you look at that, and there was the case in Spain where the doctor was done for
Mm.
it, and they said at the time there were footballers, there were athletes, the cyclists all got their names were brought out, but the footballers, they kept it quiet, and
Burned the
yeah,
bags.
there's a lot of rumors there. Yeah, unfortunately, they made the decision to destroy the
Yeah, I
evidence.
mean, I always call Messi the growth hormone goat.
Yeah, it's. I mean, he is the best footballer ever, but you don't know
Yeah,
with that because he needed growth hormone, and they gave it to him. But how do you know? Like, if you look at how fast he is, or was more when especially when he
yeah.
was younger, would growth hormone have
Who
helped him do
knows?
that when he was developing? If they gave him additional, it's very
Well,
hard
he's
to
not
tell.
6'6", so yeah, there is
Yeah,
that in his favor.
yeah.
Um, all the sports science stuff, has it impacted the way you play at all? And maybe the things that you saw when you were at Palace, has it impacted how you see football and how you play yourself?
Yeah, I think sports science wise and fitness wise, it has
Yeah,
changed things because I learned things about, for example, doing squats and doing deadlifts and the sort of Olympic lifts that when I was younger I had the idea that football was more about muscle memory, and that if I was doing squats I would destroy that and I'd lose my touch. And then it's only when you see that actually this is really beneficial and you do it. So probably it was in my 30s that I started doing that, and the difference in performance that I found, the change in pace that I found because of that. Not that I'm particularly quick anyway, but it made me faster, made me able to turn sharper, which made a difference and allowed me to keep playing for a bit longer, you know, at a high level. Um, I wish I could have gone back 10 years and been doing those things like the squats and deadlifts and things, because they are incredible.
Yeah, it's difficult to explain to people who haven't done it the
Yeah,
change and how it makes you feel, because there's always this idea that if you start doing squats and deadlifts you'll get back pain, but I found it was the other way
yeah,
around. You know, dentists, we've got issues with backs and necks. Whenever I've been
yeah,
regular within the gym and doing things, I felt like the pain just slowly drops away, or the
yeah,
tightness in that lower kind of sacroiliac region just sorts itself out a little bit. You know, strengthening that core up.
yeah,
But it's a difficult thing to describe to someone who doesn't really has never done gym what the
yeah.
difference it makes to you can be.
And there's a lot of things like I didn't want to bulk up because I preferred to be lighter and felt that that would keep me more agile. So I would stay away from weights. I mean, I did upper body weights, but it was always relatively light
Mm,
weights and high reps. And that I've kept that way with my upper body, but just in terms of adding in the lower body workout with higher weights, the difference it makes, as you say, you know, your core is that bit stronger and you are able to have a better, you know, a better sort of your technique when you're running, for example, is better because you're more upright and you push more with your glutes, and so it adds so much, and you're then much less likely to get injured.
yeah, yeah. It makes a big difference. I think you feel like you can hold people off a little better. You're not pushed off the ball so
Yeah,
much. Yeah, really interesting. How about on a tactical level? Did you see things at Palace and maybe not Orient? I don't know that you kind of saw. Okay, well that's really interesting. Um, and it's something stick with you.
yeah. I mean, you do see quite a lot, and you see how the coaches at that level, or the newer coaches, start to analyze the game and how they start to look for patterns within the game. You know, whereas when you're a player and you play a lot, you a lot of the times for myself, it's like you're trying to win your battle. So you've got a midfielder and you're trying to overpower
Mm,
him and be better than him, and then you know what you can do in that way, how you can isolate people. But when you start to look at patterns and okay, you need to play this pass regularly, you start to look at them saying that. So when you're in this position, this is the pass you look for. So then the person who's making the run knows what they are doing and knows what you are going to do. So that was very interesting.
becomes a bit more, telepathic almost, but it's maybe just worked on.
Yeah, you've got to have some idea because you, especially at that level, you have to play the game at such a pace, and the decisions are made are instantaneous almost, without real time to process it and without time to
Mm,
think. So you have to drill those decisions into people. This is the right pass. This is the right thing you do. It's been interesting actually. So probably I've learned more on a tactical and on a coaching point of view from the British medical team, where we've appointed, you know, a higher level coach who does that with his sessions. He'll build a session from the fundamentals and show you this is the type of pass you should aim for. You know, you should aim to split the lines. If you can't go through the team, you go around them. And he will start that off with small boxes of 4 or 5 players, and then expand it until in an 11-side game you're using the same principle.
across the whole
So
pitch.
again, people, yeah, across the whole pitch with 11 players. So still it's the same thing. You know, if you can't go through, you go around. But if you can go through, the direct ball is the best one. It moves you up the pitch quickest and takes out layers of defense. So you learn a lot from doing that and actually being coached, which is quite interesting.
Does it change how you watch football as well? Because I found that the more I've read around coaching books and stuff like that, I'm watching a different game to everyone else, or a lot of the people that are casual fans, and you tear your hair out of some of the things people are saying.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as an Arsenal fan, and I regularly go to the stadium and have a season ticket there, and you sit there and you'll hear people say things that you just know are
Yeah.
wrong, and you can see why they react that way. But actually, they don't understand what's happening within the game to see why that decision has
Mm.
been made. You know, so it does infuriate you a little bit when you start to
Yeah,
see that.
I don't like going on Twitter either. I'm not like a football banter guy. I can't do it, you know, because I'm
Yeah,
just like, well, why did this happen? Like, get to the root cause. I don't care who made the last mistake. Where did the first something go wrong? Um, so
yeah,
it's interesting how you can. watch the same thing and come to so many different conclusions. Of course, I'm right, but
Yeah, of course, never wrong either.
no.
It's interesting because you do see that, and I like, my firm belief is it's about processes, and you have to look at the processes first before you look at the results.
Mm,
And you learn that in everything. And if you keep doing the right process, your results will be correct over a period of time. But you might, you can. The beauty of sport is you can have a bit of bad luck.
yeah, an injury or someone
Yeah,
slips, you know.
exactly. Losing their foot in at the wrong moment, and then that leads you to lose a game where you should have won because you did everything else correctly.
Mm,
You know.
and referees, let's just not.
Yeah, let's not
Let's
talk
not.
about referees.
Yeah, let's. The British medical team. How did you get involved in that? Because you were involved right down at the beginning, weren't you? Um, I think you came
Yeah.
around our ends for the trials. I can't quite remember that far back, but I remember it was very rainy, like that day.
Yeah. So my first trial was held. I think it was held. I know it was. It was held in Peterborough,
Right.
um, because Kevin Stanton King and Dave Llewellyn, who was the coach at the time, that's where they lived, and so they held the trial there. And I was working down in Brighton doing an orthopedic shift, and had to finish the shift. So I was doing the weekend overnight, so I had to finish the night and leave to drive to the trial for like 10 a.m. And it was like a 2.5 hour drive.
Yeah.
So I had to basically miss my post-8 ward round, but I just saw the consultant and said to him, "Look, I've got trials for the British medical football team," and he was like a sports guy himself, so he said, "Look, don't worry about it, just go," and sent me off to the trials.
Were you wolfing down some pasta in at 9 a.m.? Was that your pre-match meals, or were you not that? Because I remember at one time Wayne Rooney was complaining about midday kickoffs, that you had
Uh,
to get up at 6 and you had to have big bowls of pasta at 7 or 8 a.m. because that's what the meal you're
yeah.
supposed to have. At that point, that's what they were having before the games for the pre-loading of carbs and stuff. Is that is that what happened for you, or do you just jump in the car and
So
go?
I had to jump in the car and set off. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it in
Mm,
time. And I just grabbed a sandwich, I think, from the nearest petrol station. Ate that on the way. Had like a Lucozade. I'd probably had 2-3 hours sleep. But turned up to the trials, and then yeah, it was an interesting trial. Seeing everybody there. That's where I met your dad for the first
yeah,
time, and then seeing Dave Llewellyn, who essentially at that trial we just did a warm up and then we played a game. Um, so I spent my trial match feeling like I was chasing
there's
Rich
shadows.
Norris
Yeah,
around. I was chasing Rich Norris around the pitch, and like everybody else, I could manage myself against, but Rich Norris was just on another level. Um, and yeah, I was chasing him around quite a lot.
yeah. He's it's amazing. He's for those who don't know, he's a little bit of an older gentleman. He's now retired. But you would have been what, mid 20s that time, and he'd have been in his 40s or 50s, and you still couldn't get
Yeah,
anywhere near him.
yeah, so at that time I think I just turned, no, I was
Yeah.
29 at that time, and he was late 40s actually. But his intelligence, his touch, his movement were just unbelievable, and he just ran the game in central midfield, and it was incredible to see. And he's over time, as he's got a bit older, he slowed down a bit and he got injuries, but when he was younger, he was even more incredible than when I played against
Mm,
him. So
yeah, crazy. And then in terms of the tournaments, first year out, Germany 2006, wasn't it?
I came a
Were
bit
you not
later.
2006?
So no.
Okay.
So my first tournament was, I think it was 2010. So you had done South Korea,
Oh, okay.
and you had won the tournament basically, and I joined the year after. And I got introduced to the team because Ash and Peggy had got into the team the year
Mm,
before. Well, actually, Ash had been there since I think 2006. He had been there from the very beginning, but Peggy had come in 2009 and won the tournament in South Korea. And then I came the year after, which was in Austria.
Right, I'm getting my dates wrong. It was a long time ago, to be fair.
Yeah, it is a long time. And once you play quite a few tournaments, they do blur into each
Yeah.
other a bit. I probably should just explain
All right.
for
Yeah.
people who
So
are watching that.
yeah, go for it. Do you want to give the little story about what the British medical football team is all about?
Yes, it's a national team for doctors within Britain, and it's a British team rather than an English team because they won't allow us to do that. And we play in a tournament every year, which is usually held in a different country, and a different country is chosen to host it. And you play over 7 days. You play 6 games. You start off in a group, then you have quarterfinal, semi-final, final, and ultimately you can be crowned world champions of medical football. The tournament's just grown and grown each year. It's got bigger and bigger. So there were 12 teams that
Yeah.
participated. The last time it was held, which was I think there were 24 teams in Mexico. So
Yeah, I missed that one, didn't I? I can't remember why.
yeah, might have been working. Strange
I
times.
think yeah, I don't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So which were your biggest kind of moments in for British medical football team?
So I think there's a few. The first tournament was interesting. Going to it was in Austria,
Yeah.
and in a beautiful location, and you're just in the middle of the Alps, and you play in this tournament. The hotel was right next to these two beautiful football pitches, and just playing against teams from other countries, it was such an experience. When you see the Spanish team play lots of short passes and very intricate football. The Brazilian team, you've got the centre back chesting the ball down rather than heading it away and like dribbling past the striker.
Yeah.
It's just you realize that football is very cultural, and the teams in those countries play very much like you see their national teams do, like you see their sides do. And that was interesting for me, only ever playing English football in an English way at different levels, from Sunday football, school football, all the way up to semi-pro, but always English football. To have that different challenge was quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that I remember seeing was that there were grown adult doctors, 40s and 50s, genuinely diving
Yeah,
and screaming when
yeah,
they're going down, which was hilarious to watch.
yeah,
But there's no kind of like embarrassment about it. They were just like, yeah, this is what we do.
yeah.
And they just went for it.
It's a part of the game, and if you did that on a Sunday league in England, your own team would probably just ostracize you
Mm.
because they'd say, "What are you doing?" Now, probably a bit less so, especially if you were winning free kicks and penalties. But in those sort of times,
I mean,
it was unheard of for English players to do that.
I used to create contact. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I can bet you did.
I was a clever little winger until I got a bit fat and heavy,
Uh-huh.
and then I played centre back in uni. Can you believe?
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, does it? What,
No.
5'9"?
Uh-huh. Could picture you as a fullback, but not as a centre back.
It was centre back. Well, it was in a 3. So
Uh-huh.
I would
Okay,
come
that
out and I
makes more
was like,
sense.
it was more of a 6 to be honest. And I'm I'm a loudmouth, so I would scream at everyone else, telling them what to do, essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's
but yeah, I got a bit heavy in uni, so I wasn't the quickest. Well, not as quick as I used to be. Not as quick as I used to
uh-huh.
be. So yeah, things changed. Tell me about the very last tournament in the Czech Republic, that we
So
did quite well in.
I see, yeah, so we did well. Actually, it's over the last two tournaments. So it's because you
Oh, I
missed
didn't know.
Mexico, you've forgotten
Oh,
that.
okay,
Yeah.
right. I need to change the title now, don't
So
I? Double champion.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So we we went to Czech Republic, and the Czech Republic had entered as a new team, I think in 2015. And in their first four tournaments, they reached the final once, and then they won it 3 times in a row. And then we had to go to Czech
Yeah,
Republic, to not we had to go there, but that was where the tournament was being held. So it was their home grounds, and we went there. It was our second year with our new coach Dan Collins, and he had brought together the players and trained us to a much higher level, and we managed to get through the tournament. some amazing matches along the way, and then played Czech Republic in the final. And despite their local referee doing his best to give them the win, we managed to beat them 2-0.
Yeah.
So that was pretty sweet. And it was so as I said, I joined the team after they had won. So essentially, I hadn't won the tournament for the whole 8-9 years that I'd played for the team. So it was my first win after a lot of years of, losing on penalties in
Oh my God,
Manchester
the
in the
Manchester
final.
one still haunts. And we were 3-0 up, right?
Yeah.
3-0 up?
So we were
2-0
2-0 up in the final after about 20 minutes, looking good, and then managed to throw it away with a last-minute equaliser that just came from a mistake from our most reliable players, and it's completely unexpected. And then to lose on penalties to them, we only missed, I think, one penalty, but that was enough, and we lost in our home ground. So that was, a big experience.
I remember I'd ordered Nando's to watch, sit at the side and watch the final, and I couldn't eat it because I was too engrossed in the game. So there was a whole chicken there, and I'd just been picking at it, and I didn't get through the damn thing. That was a bit sad for me. It's bad that I remember that, isn't it?
What you're saying, it still
It's
hurts.
irritating.
You missed your Nando's.
Irritating that I didn't
that
win, and I didn't finish the Nando's. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bad combination.
It's 2-1.
At least if we won, you could. Yeah. Yeah, that was and it was it was great. We played in the Commonwealth Stadium, which is right next to the Etihad, which is Manchester City Stadium, and that was a great pitch, a great little stadium.
The council house, we call it, actually.
Yeah, basically. I know. Yeah, you won't like it, but well, I mean, the Commonwealth Stadium was at least a great stadium for us until we lost.
Yeah. No, it's been a bit of a crazy ride. What are you going to be playing for much longer? What's your legs saying? How much have you got left in the tank?
Yeah, I don't know. It's always hard to tell. I mean, I have no plans to stop, but it's getting harder and harder to find regular 11-a-side football, on a Saturday.
Yeah. Well, lockdown.
And yeah, I mean, lockdowns killed it a bit, but also, teams are struggling to get players together, or you join a new team and they look at you and they say, oh, you're 40 years of age. So, well, I'm not 40 yet, but I'm 39. Let's not age myself prematurely. But they look at you and they say, okay, you're an old guy. We'll put you in the third team. And really, maybe your ability-wise, you still probably could play first team level. But you can't do that. Or if they do put you in the first team, you'll be on the bench. And so it's very difficult in that way. So I've got to figure out a way around that. But I've been playing a lot of 5-a-side and 7-a-side.
It's not the same though. I don't like 5-a-side. It feels like too much of an equalizer for people who are unfit. Not that I am any kind of fitness at this stage myself, but when I was playing more regularly.
Yeah, perhaps it does. I mean, I'm quite lucky in the area that I live in South London, and the 5-a-side pitches we have here. You get a really high standard of football, and you get a lot of really skillful young guys that are playing, and you're playing against them. So, for me, some of the people that I play against are better than the people that I would play in the World Championship. So, it's good. It keeps me sharp. It keeps the touch sharp. It keeps your awareness going at least, and then you can back that up with the 11-a-side when you go to training sessions. So I definitely will be continuing as long as I can. I mean, we won in Prague, and then we won last year. The last tournament. The tournament was cancelled this year, but the last tournament was in Mexico in Cancun, and we managed to win that one as well. Again, beating Czech Republic in the final. So we've won it twice.
How did they react to that?
The Czech Republic are usually quite they're quite nice and sportsmanlike actually when they lose. They put everything into winning. They're very competitive. They're a very physical side. One of their players, for example, in the final, we went 1-0 down. One of their players just ran into the back of me and dived. It was in the area. The ball had been crossed in, and I was just standing, and he ran into the back of me, screamed, and fell down. And the South American referees bought it and gave them a penalty.
Is there no implementation of VAR at this point in time?
Unfortunately not. No. They tend to video the games, but the video comes out 2 months later. But
why does it take them so long? Because I can stream like this in a couple of minutes
Uh-huh.
and it's out live. It's not
Yeah, I don't know.
difficult.
I'm not sure. No. So for example, and it
Yeah,
varies actually. I mean, in Czech Republic, they were very good. The games were up by the
yeah,
same
yeah.
evening, so you could look at them. But in Mexico, I think the final still hasn't been released. You know, whoever was editing the videos,
The
he's
referee's
still,
taking the
you know,
tape, seeing that dive.
yeah, could well be that. Yeah, and it's a shame because it's nice to see, you know, when somebody scores a good
Mm.
goal or you do a good skill, it's nice to have that.
Yeah, I think my dad's got all his
Yeah,
saved somewhere.
yeah, I'm
All the
sure he does.
goals.
Yeah.
I think there's one from 2006 he keeps on, he brings out every now and then, shot from outside the area. I think it was a first time volley or something. Uh,
Oh
uh,
wow.
I'm pretty sure I've seen that a few times. So I don't know if it's on YouTube. Maybe I'll put it on YouTube.
Yeah, I think you should do. You should at least upload it because it's quite interesting when you see
Yeah.
them.
So yeah, two-time world champion. I've missed one of them, which
Yeah,
is irritating. So
yeah.
Mexico as well. That would have been
It's all
great.
right. Yeah, I mean Mexico is unbelievable. Cancun's such a
Mm.
beautiful place, and it's a combination. Well, I mean it's a nice place to relax because the resorts are beautiful, but then you've got where the tournament was held. The weather was amazing. You know, it's baking
Yeah.
hot and playing football in the sunshine. There's not much that's better than that.
Yeah. No, I hope I'll make it to another one just to see whether my dad still wants to play Masters and stuff. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah.
Um, Being away from work and football, um,
Uh-huh.
I know you read a whole load of books, and anyone who's had a little look at your Instagram in the last couple of days, after I've tagged you and stuff, will see there's just endless books that you post
Uh-huh.
up.
Yeah.
What are the main things that you take away from your reading?
So I usually learn quite a lot from my reading, and it's something that I've always done, and that's why I've kept up
Mm,
with it really. And even now, you know, as a GP, you have to know a little bit about a lot of different things. And through my reading, I'll learn things, you know, for example, about psychology that it gives me a greater understanding of my
yeah,
patients. You know, and so there's almost a lesson in every book. I do like reading fiction as well, where you just kind of
lose yourself in it.
lose
Yeah,
yourself in
exactly.
a yeah, and it's nice to relax with something like that. But a lot of my books are non-fiction, and I like to learn things. It improves your view of the world and your understanding of the world. So
Is there any particular books that stick in your mind? Because I know we both read Rennie Edo Lodge's book, which I really
uh-huh.
enjoyed, but there were certain things that I was just like, okay, just tone it down a bit, when she went deep on
Uh-huh.
the intersectional feminism and all that stuff, I was like, okay, you've completely lost me here.
Uh-huh.
But
You're not a feminist, is that what you're saying?
no,
Okay.
probably not. Not how
Okay.
they would like to be
That's
called a
interesting.
feminist.
Yeah.
I think that's the
Yeah.
clarification. Um, like there's the first wave, second wave, and third wave feminism, isn't there? So
Uh-huh.
I'm somewhere in one of the previous waves.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, you know, for me, I was brought up by my
Yeah,
mum, you know, on our own. She'd split from my dad when I was only one, and so from a young age, I've been quite aware of the power and strength of women. So I always am more probably open to that. And I think culturally, sometimes it's a bit different, you know, how you view things. But I I believe strongly actually in intersectionality because when you look at oppression of people and people's struggles, they often interlink, and the ways that people are talked about when there's racism or you know sexism, misogyny, it's often the same language that's used and the same ideas but just a different subject.
should we
So
explain to people what intersectionality is? Because I think we're going to lose people at a rapid rate of knots otherwise.
uh-huh.
So
Okay.
how would you drop it as like the easiest way to tell people what we're talking about, really?
I think I would say that it's the fact that any struggle against oppression has a relationship with every other struggle against oppression, and they relate. So for example, okay, black people are oppressed racially, but black women are oppressed even more and more so than even white women are, and that's where the intersectionality comes
Yeah.
in. Um, and the fact that if you fight against racism, you have to fight against the sexism, because otherwise black women will be left behind while black men might be elevated. So you've got to see the relationship between those things and fight all oppressions equally, so they are intersectional.
That's well put. Yeah, it's kind of like a Venn diagram, isn't it, of people being
Yeah,
put down, and there's some crossover between everyone in some
yeah,
way.
definitely.
Yeah. So I mean the feminism thing is, I think it's gone one way in the States, and I think we're fine in the UK,
Uh-huh.
equal pay, equal rights, all of that. But there's definitely a section where it's like we're gonna get back at everyone else now. So
Uh-huh.
maybe that's where I like, okay, that's a bit weird now.
That's what I mean. There's a lot of that sort of idea that, that same idea is then put. You see that argument is then put into racism
Yeah.
as well. So, for example, black people want equality, and Black Lives Matter is about equality, but the people that don't want that will turn it around and say black supremacy rather than white supremacy.
Yeah.
And then people put that on feminists, and they say, oh, well, certain feminists are looking for women to dominate men rather than men to dominate
So you're
women. And
taking the
it's
worst case of everything.
exactly,
Yeah.
and everybody's on a different scale, and you can't take a whole movement and put it down to that. And you've essentially got to judge what's right. And is equality right? Well, for me, yes, and I'm
Yeah.
sure for you it is. And so that's what you've got to argue for.
Yeah. It's all these things are very difficult, and there's so many different aspects to everything, isn't there? So you've got to kind of, in the moment of, if something's happening, you just got to, what feels right and what feels equal and what feels the correct thing to do. And it could be
Uh-huh.
one day you go against someone saying a certain thing, and then the other day you're on somebody else's side, and it's just that individual interaction. You try and be
Yeah,
equitable every time.
of course. Yeah, got to try to do your best, and that's it's important within the work we do as well, that you're treating people
Yeah.
equally. There's a lot within the news. Last week it was about the increased likelihood of black women dying during childbirth or during
Yeah,
pregnancy,
and having teeth
and they're
taken
much
out as
more
well.
likely
I
to.
saw that recently.
Yeah, so that's another example. Having teeth taken out, they're much less likely to be given analgesia appropriately. They're under prescribed pain relief. And so all these things you've got to recognize that they
Yeah.
exist, and then you've got to try to fight against them. And that, again, like using the example of how something you can read which might not seem related to your job becomes related to your
Yeah.
job. In the Renee Edo Lodge book, she talks about, she takes a story of, for example, a child from their birth and those sorts of stats, like the increased likelihood of dying during childbirth, then goes into what happens to them in school, how their grades are more likely to be lower, how they're less likely to then get admitted to the college they want or the university they want, and how all these
Small decisions along the way, or the small interactions change. It's like one
yeah,
degree, one degree. Eventually, you've done 180 and you're going backwards.
exactly. So you've gone through school, they've marked you down, you felt that you're not good
Mm.
academically, and so then you don't go to the university you want, and then you're much more likely to be pulled over to by the police. You're much more likely to be physically restrained by the police or a taser used on you. So all these steps, if you then had to go to court over a minor infringement, you're much more likely to serve a custodial sentence. So everything builds up. So then you've got to then look at that and think, when you see somebody and they might have that background, and that might be why when you see them, for example, they can be angry or wary about you, and you've got to figure out why
Mm.
that is, and it gives you an insight into how people's lives can be different.
Yeah, it's this. Have you seen the video where it's take one step forward if, and there's a whole bunch of people, and
Yeah,
it's like if
yeah,
if you never had to worry about food, if you never had to work two jobs as a an underage person, all these different things, and then
yeah,
like there's a load of guys who were very ethnic or girls who were very ethnic stood on the start line, and then there was some people who were a lot further ahead, and it was very interesting
yeah,
about how the people who were further ahead than the people who were right at the back.
yeah, And sometimes doing something like that, when people watch that video, it makes them understand what privilege is and what that means, because you can have a tough life,
Yeah.
feel like you're not privileged, but actually you've had a lot of privilege. I had it in my life. I came from an area that wasn't very wealthy. I went to a school that wasn't very good, but my mum read a lot, for example. So when she would go and buy a book, I would buy a book because I had that example. But if your mum doesn't really read, well, that's a disadvantage. If your mum can't afford to buy you a book, that's another disadvantage. So if I didn't have that, there's no way that I would be a doctor now, or been able to study medicine.
Yeah, and it's something really small, right?
Yeah.
Right back early doors can change the outlook of things. 20, 30 years down the line. And that's what people fail to recognize a lot of the time. They're always talking about, oh well, I see online quite a lot. Black people always mess around with knives and they're always in gangs, and it's never that simple. Yes, that might be the outcome, but it's not what's causing it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Are you in favor of UBI? I love UBI.
Yeah, so I think it's something that the evidence is strongly behind, and the theory behind it makes sense, and it works when it's put into practice. And I think in a time like now, where you've got something like COVID, it's shown us how our current system doesn't work appropriately, and something like UBI would be a suitable answer for that. So yeah, I'm in favor, but of course,
Supposed to disagree, and then I can argue.
Yeah, that's it.
So
try. It's hard because when it comes to politics, it's going to be a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much on the same side the whole way through, from your retweets and my retweets. I'm pretty sure we're pretty well aligned. By the way, UBI, guys, for everyone who's listening, is universal basic income. There's a very interesting study from Canada, I think it was, in a certain town or village where they were having particularly high crime rates, where they trialed it, and they more or less eradicated the crime in that area because everyone had, what was it, 10 grand a year.
Yeah.
You just got given it, and then you could do what you wanted, but that meant you don't have to think about rent or food. So now people aren't going out nicking stuff and pushed to do crazy things.
It's pretty incredible. And there's this idea here, that, for example, even with the dole, people are getting benefits, they're being given free stuff, and that's what they look at universal basic income as. But it doesn't work like that, and they think that if people get that, they'll be less likely to work, but it works the opposite way. So unemployment goes down in most places where they introduce a UBI, which is
an adequate UBI as well. This is the thing that's kind of missed out. So if it's too low, it doesn't have the right effect because people are still under the poverty line. Once you get over the poverty line and you're not worried about all the things that you previously worried about, then magical things happen.
Yeah, exactly. So it works, and it's a bit of a shame that we haven't taken the opportunity to make those changes when we were hit with a crisis that meant, there's two ways you can respond to this crisis, and we've chosen a way that probably is not long-term solutions, it's short-term solutions, and unfortunately that
we went with COVID contracts to Serco.
Essentially. Yeah, exactly. Basically, giving Serco all the money, or eating out to help out, which was really eat out to spread COVID.
Yeah.
So it's not.
And tax is going to go up on the back of that, so to cover it.
Yeah.
Which thank you so much. Although I'm unemployed, so well. But I'm not on UBI. I'm not on the benefits. I'm just living off savings. So there we go.
That's
and I'll be back in work soon. I'm sure as soon as this all blows over. Anything else interesting that you've read recently that you can enlighten us on? Because we're trying to take this entire podcast. You've been the circuit breaker for me. You're the 2 week. You're the 2 week. What's it called that we needed from Teeth Talk?
To try to take it into something different. I mean, I read quite a lot, and I read the most recent post on my Instagram, I think is a book that I read, which is the Body Keeps Score, which I personally learned a lot from about myself, but it also gave me a lot of insight into certain things psychologically. It's about, I don't know, you might have read Either have you read it
I've
or
not
you?
read that yet. I've just scrolled onto
Okay.
your page to have a look actually to see what it was called. So,
Uh,
but what's the premise of the book and what have you taken away from it?
so the premise of the book is looking at the way that trauma, particularly childhood trauma, but any trauma, such as war veterans who have post-traumatic stress from seeing what happens during war and the horrific things that they
Yeah.
see, how that can affect us psychologically, how it prevents us from functioning normally. And the book describes how it does it in terms of our neuroanatomy, our neurological function, and how it represents on our body, and how it leads to a bit of a cycle of
Yeah.
problems that can follow people through their whole life. And for example, child sexual abuse, the way that that can make people operate psychologically can then shut them down and prevent them from having happy, loving relationships later in life. So that he goes through that and gives a lot of the evidence behind that, and then he goes into treatment options and treatment avenues for how you can't solve the trauma, but you can make your brain function in a way that's more suitable and that allows you to function normally and make the right decisions.
Right.
And there's a wide range of things, so neurofeedback, for example, where you look at your brain waves and you learn to control your brain waves, and you do that through feedback from seeing it on a screen and being able to then adjust that, which is a bit more complicated. And then things like yoga, where a lot of people that have been through sexual abuse, for example, they disconnect their mind and their body because they almost take themselves out of their body to not suffer what they're going through when they're being abused. And that carries into later life.
Right.
So people carry tension in their body. They don't know. They then suffer more health problems because they're not aware of what's going on within their body. And if you can use something like yoga to connect that by learning what is your body position, how do I balance, what are my muscles doing now, how do my muscles feel, you're connecting what your body feels and your mind, and it can improve that. So it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, I read something or listened to someone else's podcast recently, and they were talking about meditation and
Uh-huh.
how initially it's really, really difficult because all the unprocessed or all the stuff that you've been putting in that little black box and turning the key on comes out,
Hmm.
and until you've dealt
Yeah.
with it or even just like processed that information or dealt with that
Yeah.
emotion or feeling, until you've done that, it's very difficult. But once you get past this kind of deluge of nonsense, kind of like the post-COVID triage that you had to do for 6 weeks,
Uh-huh.
then after that it becomes more easy and your mind gets a bit blanker when you want to clear
Yeah.
your mind.
Yeah.
I don't,
It's very interesting how something like that takes such practice.
mm,
You just think meditating and clearing your mind should be easy, but it's not when you try and sit down and do it, and it can be very hard. And you're right, you need to almost declutter to be able to.
yeah. Do you think there's an issue with kind of the modern way of life in that there's always got to be someone's playing music in the background, or you've got a TV on, or there's always something there to occupy the mind?
I think there is, and I think that becomes addictive in a
Mm.
way, that you always need something to fill the space rather than to sit there. You almost have to dedicate yourself to say, and I do the same thing. I'll sit down for 5 minutes without the TV on, and I'll pick up my phone and I'll put my phone down, and then you hear it buzz, so you pick it up again.
Spare a
And
thought for me, man.
yeah, I can imagine it's not
My
easy.
thumbs hurt from
Uh-huh.
texting.
I can,
It's not
yeah,
good.
no,
I've
yeah.
actually bought, and this is crazy, for my phone and iPad, I have a keyboard for them now.
Oh boy, for your phone as
Yeah, so
well.
that I don't, if I've got lots and lots of organizing to do, of
Uh-huh.
texting people, because unfortunately you can't really text people on Instagram on desktop. It's very clunky.
Yeah.
So you need a keyboard for your phone
Oh
to
boy.
do things. So yeah, and then ice them up. Yes, my mom saw
Uh-huh.
me doing stretches on the kitchen worktop, just putting my hands flat because they just go like
Oh
this.
boy, I can imagine.
Yeah. But yeah, modern life. I think at some point I'll have to have a week off or I just don't touch it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's things that I've done. I mean, for you, it's a bit different because you're running the Dentist of Instagram account, and
Yeah, it's almost my job,
got
isn't it, at the moment?
yeah, it's got a big following, and so you have to deal with that. Me using Instagram is social, and like it's more for yourself to kind of show people what your friends and things, what are you
Yeah.
doing, and what training you're doing. So it's a bit different. So I don't get nearly probably as many notifications as you do on Instagram,
Well, you're much better
but
looking than me, by the way, so I'm sure there's a few coming in.
I didn't say that, but thank you. Yeah, no, but it's interesting, So I recently turned off notifications. I didn't do it on Instagram because I don't get enough,
Right.
but like
Maybe now.
on WhatsApp, maybe, hopefully, no, I turned off notifications on WhatsApp, and it's amazing the difference it makes without your phone buzzing that little bit more, and for me again in WhatsApp, it's largely I play for 2 or 3 different football
Yeah.
teams, and so those football team WhatsApp groups, there are always messages going through that, and so your phone will constantly be buzzing, and the temptation is always to look at it. You turn off the notification, and it does take that psychological pressure
Yeah.
away.
All
You
my
can.
WhatsApp groups, as a rule on WhatsApp, it turns off all the notifications from groups because
Okay.
you can go away for 5 minutes and there's 300 messages. You've seen
Yeah.
it, you know it happens, and you go in. There's 7 different threads of conversation going on here, and I can't keep up.
Yeah. Trying to read and go back to
Yeah,
it as well, and you've missed like 100 messages. It's always a nightmare.
yeah, no, it's too much, and I think that's part of the issue that people have with mental health at the moment.
Yeah.
It's not the whole issue because there's a lot of stuff going on. Um, yeah. So how's social
Yeah. I
media been
think
for you outside of WhatsApp?
so. I mean, I find Instagram to be quite good and quite useful. I enjoy it, and you've seen I put up a lot of the fitness training that
Yeah,
I do, and it's quite interesting for me. The part of the reason that I like it is that you get a lot of feedback from people that I know, like either guys that I know saying, "Oh, well, let me come and join you for training." Oh, I see you go to the track. Can I come
I've
with
seen
you?
Harith tagging along with you a couple of times for sure.
Yeah, so I've been with Harith a couple of times, and and that's it's always really good that you get other people. For me, it's good,
Yeah.
because I would just do the training anyway. I've done it for the last 37 years or whatever of my
Mm.
life, that I've just trained, and I will do it on my own. But if somebody comes with you, then it's nice to have a bit of company, train with them. When I go to the track, I'll have guys come with me that are faster than me. So I've got to try and chase them down, and work hard to keep up with them. So I found it really good in that way. And then also just promoting health, as a GP.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get people saying, well, obviously you're a GP, you've got a busy work life, but yet you still fit in your exercise. So then it can be done.
Do you have
you know.
patients who are following you? Do you know that? Do you know of
So I have,
patients?
yeah, a few patients that follow
Yeah.
me on Instagram.
It's always a
Yeah.
weird situation, I felt.
Uh-huh.
Because there are. I mean, I have now got a private story. Not that I use
Uh-huh.
it very much actually, because although I post a lot, there's not a lot of real information that goes out there. I don't know if you
Yeah.
noticed that at all. There's a lot of kind of fluff, but there's
Yeah.
never anything too personal that goes out there. Do you think that that's an issue?
So I think about that sometimes, and I wonder, for example, as somebody that occasionally posts topless photos of me working out, do you really want your patients seeing you like that? But again, it's nothing,
Mm,
it's nothing explicit, it's nothing too
yeah,
personal, it's not my personal life or anything like that I'm showing. And all the things that I show, I think are there to be out in the open, and it wouldn't change a doctor patient
yeah. That's
relationship.
really
And
important.
you know um yeah, it doesn't to me, it doesn't cause any issues, but everybody's
Yeah,
different in that
yeah. I
way.
suppose if you're someone that gets more embarrassed, or if you put more holiday type photos, if you're that kind of person who gets embarrassed with that sort of thing, then
Yeah.
it's down to the individual to work out their own line in the sand or whatever it might be. Um, do you
Yeah.
tend to be a consumer of content, or someone who sticks your own stuff up and then buggers off from the platforms?
Just wait for the notifications. No, I do consume quite a
Yeah,
bit, and again, I've tried to cut back, but I will. scroll through, see stories, and you can actually learn a lot from these things, and I think it has an important role. I think, for example, on Twitter, I follow quite a lot of people, a lot of medics, and then I have a lot of football people
Yeah.
there. And there's things that you'll pick up that you just wouldn't be aware of, news stories or articles people will share. So I find the positives of social media for me outweigh the negatives.
Yeah. In terms of being a GP, do you see issues with younger generations? Do you have any things that pop up from time to time? Especially, I think it's crazy that 12-year-olds have phones with the internet and stuff like
Hmm.
that. Uh, is that something that you see as a GP with terms of mental health? Because there was the whole thing about, I don't know if you saw the suicide cult thing in America,
Yeah,
um, which I don't know very much about, but essentially there were kids just egging each other on to self harm, um,
yeah,
which is it's crazy because young people, especially, I think boys are reckless and hurt each other physically, but the mental
yeah.
side. So when boys are acting up because
Uh-huh.
they're literally just punching the lights out of each other, and it's really obvious.
Uh-huh.
But you give a girl a phone, and what used to be passing notes in class is now 24/7. You know, um, bullying basically, and they work via social
Yeah.
exclusion as opposed to you know actually saying something mean. It's they cut people out on the outside. So
Yeah.
do you see that kind of thing?
I think you do see it particularly in the younger people where there's a different kind of pressure there,
Yeah,
because you could go to school before and okay, you always had the popular kids and the kids who weren't so popular or the kids that were bullied a little bit. And social media adds another layer because okay, you could have not really got along with anybody in school, but when you went home, you weren't faced with that again and
yeah,
again. But now, if you go home and your Instagram, you've got 5 followers, and the popular girl has 2,000, and when you go to school, they mock you about your social media or something, or you post a picture and they comment on it, and people are trolling you and that kind of thing. You get a lot more potential for psychological harm.
mm,
Um, you don't see, not that you see things like anxiety in young girls, but
yeah,
I can't tell you if it's a higher rate now than it was, because actually, I mean, rates of anxiety have been going up over the last 20, 30 years
yeah,
anyway
yeah,
in the whole population. So it's difficult to tell the effect social media has on that. But interactions are different. And for example, I was speaking to somebody the other day about the Snapchat filters and the way that Snapchat filters make people look is very interesting because it's a subtle effect that makes you look better. So it makes your eyes bigger, it makes your cheekbones higher, and makes your lips fuller.
yeah.
So you look more attractive with a Snapchat filter, but in real life, you don't look like that. But then what are your options then? Either you just only post pictures and you don't meet people in real life, or you get surgery. So is there now more pressure for those kind
So
of
it's either
things?
lockdown or
Or
surgery.
yeah, basically. At least with lockdown, you don't get
And you,
COVID,
and
so
you have
it's
to
all
wear a
right.
mask everywhere, so literally no one knows. So you really just need
Yeah,
nice eyes, and you're home free.
that's it. That's it. I don't know if you were you much of a gamer.
When I was younger, never, not very much online, to be honest. I played a
Uh-huh.
bit of FIFA, and then it got to a point where it wasn't fun because they'd added all these extra controls.
Mm,
Around 2006, 2007, they started getting a bit more complex in the controls. And when
yeah.
they add more controls, you think, well, now I'll play like I play an 11 aside, and you just get
Uh-huh.
battered by some guy who's got Messi on the team. It's like, hey, this is crap now. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was and I wasn't. Um,
So why I bring that up is because it's another thing that, from the boy point of view generally, and girls do game
yeah,
as well, but from a male point of view, if you see something like a Call of Duty room and you hear how people talk to each other, you wouldn't talk to anybody in real life in that way.
mm,
There's a lot of abuse. Uh, there's a lot of swearing at people and cussing people. And I used to watch my nephews do it and think they wouldn't talk like that in real life to somebody who's probably 5 years older than them, a lot
yeah,
bigger than them. You would never talk to somebody that way, but you did. And you don't know what effect that then has, going down the line. Do people become more aggressive? Is their language more aggressive? Are they more ready to argue and fight? it's a bit different to the effect you have on girls, but it's an effect that you can have.
And then you have tied into all this the effect of nutrition.
Uh-huh.
So I can't remember the study, or I'll give you the basic vague because just the gist of it, because I can't remember who it was and when and all that sort of stuff. But kids who weren't eating, and this directly links into what Rashford's doing. The kids
Uh-huh.
who weren't eating had worse attainment in school, had worse behavioral issues, and I think they also had some other issues as well, but I literally can't remember. I remember there was a whole bunch of things that was on a list that went away as soon as they
Yeah.
had 3 square meals, and
Hmm.
that can tie into all these things as well.
Yeah.
So
Definitely. You look at the effects on children's growth from not having an appropriate breakfast, the effect on their studies. Again, it creates a good argument for schools actually providing lunches, and it would be interesting to see the effect that could have on people's studies.
yeah, I think it's pretty well. I think that is pretty well researched actually in terms of the
Yeah.
actual attainment. I just can't remember the actual thing without doing a quick Google search or something.
Yeah.
Which I generally tend to do in the background. So if you see me looking down, I'm just
Uh-huh.
going through.
You're pretty good, like being able to do it and talk at the same time. I'd lose track.
It does
I'd
my
be...
head in, but I've got to make it sound like I know things being a podcaster. So, yeah. What was this? So yeah, the book that all about mental health. Are there any takeaways that people can implement in their day-to-day life that you reckon are pretty easy to get on top of?
So I think that one of the first things is to kind of be aware that you may have had trauma in your past and that it can affect you, and that trauma might be something big that you are or are not aware of, such as physical abuse,
The
domestic
real
violence,
big
rather.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but it can be simple things such as your parent not showing you appropriate attention when you came back from school and told them about your school report, and they just ignored you because they were busy, on their
Yeah.
phone checking their Instagram, something like that.
Nanny getting
So
sent off in the quarterfinal. Could that be something?
yeah, that could be something that was traumatic.
Oh,
Like,
I'm still enraged.
I mean, as a United fan, you're enraged. Imagine what it feels like to be an
I
Arsenal fan.
watched that game. I
There's a
watched
lot.
that game recently,
Uh-huh.
and it was
The 49ers game.
yeah, I laughed so
Which,
hard because
uh-huh.
I could
Yeah.
picture in my mind a tweet that you'd sent out, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, it can't be that bad. It was
Uh-huh.
when Ferdinand, last man, how did he get away with that?
It's just ridiculous when you look at those decisions,
Yeah,
like the Van Nistelrooy stamp on Ashley Cole, and
I didn't think that was as
you
bad
think,
as was made out. I think the Ferdinand one was blatant, really bad.
I mean, yeah, it is.
Yeah,
I mean, the Ferdinand one, the linesman and the referee should have seen that was a clear red
yeah,
card. Last man took him out, didn't play the ball. It had to be a red card. The Van Nistelrooy one, I can understand in a way that the referee might have
yeah.
missed it, but the linesman was right
Well,
there,
linesmen don't see anything,
and
so
yeah, they do when they
yeah.
need to. Yeah, they do when they need to. I think that day they decided to look the other way. But yeah, that's a traumatic issue. I've got that. I
In
think
fact, no, the worst one
that
for
was one of my
Arsenal was
biggest
Van
traumas.
Persie against Barcelona.
That was pretty bad. Yeah,
That
you.
as a United fan, that one pissed me off.
Yeah, you've never seen anybody sent off for that since.
No.
That close to the whistle. Even if they were on a yellow card, the referee would never send them off because it's just stupid. But in that case, they decided to. Then losing the Champions League final against Barca, that's my other trauma.
I do remember. I don't remember the game in that much detail. Yeah.
And then Federer losing to Nadal in 2008. That was
that the
Wimbledon.
really crazy, the amazing final? Was it?
Yeah, that was the amazing final. So that's another. Lots of sports-related trauma.
I think there's a theme here, but we're suckered in and we're stuck now.
I think sport is my coping mechanism and the origin of the trauma. So yeah.
So yeah, sorry, I completely sidetracked you there with the nanny thing.
Yeah. So that my takeaway is that people should be aware that they could have trauma in their past, and that that affects them in their future and their ongoing relationships. And it's important that we try to look at ourselves and analyze what behaviors we are carrying on because of something in the past. And if you can correct them, it can really help you, in your life going
Yeah, and
forward.
that book is called The Body Keeps the Score. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
right.
I need like an Amazon link, don't I? I need to get set up one of those where I get a commission when
You
people
do.
download the Kindle book and all that.
Swipe up.
I've got Swipe Up. I
Yeah.
haven't got the Amazon link set up properly yet. Um, but
Okay.
yeah, that was a really good one. Any other particular? I mean, you kind of read Soccernomics, and that's the most recent book
Uh-huh.
that I read, and I've
Yeah.
been banging on about it on football Twitter quite a lot
Hmm.
because I'm
Yeah.
self-righteous like that when it comes to football.
When you know what you're talking
Yeah,
about, yeah.
especially because it's statistics. I love numbers, and studies
Uh-huh.
and things like that. And then it's football, how to make a good football team.
Yeah.
I love that it's nothing to do with the manager and people don't get it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's very interesting that you see that there's a lot of ideas that we have about the
Mm,
game that are not true, and until we analyze them statistically, that's the only way that we find that out, and it's very
yeah,
interesting. So that that's a and that also gives you things that I've always applied. So for example, I think it was in that book that I learned that if you're in a penalty shootout and you take the first penalty, you have a 65% chance of winning. So you should always choose to take the first
yeah.
penalty. Whereas before in my career, it'd have been like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter. Whereas now I would always tell whoever's the captain, or if I'm captain, I'd be like, well, if I win the toss, I'm taking the first penalty. And that's the reason. So it's always I find it interesting. I think we played we played a penalty shootout against somebody, and they chose to shoot second, so they won the toss, but they
It's
chose
like
to shoot second. And
your
you're
knee
already like, that's a
sliding already.
psychological boost. Yeah, so you're like, okay, now we've got a 65%
Yeah.
chance. And obviously it doesn't quite work like that, but
Mm,
you do. So you can learn a lot. There's another book that I don't know if you've read it. It's called Football
I need to
Hackers.
check that one out.
Um, so that's a really good book, and it's about the data analytics side of
Yeah, this
football.
is what
And
I'm not quite obsessed by because I think you started the eye test, but I am
uh-huh,
almost obsessed by. Yeah, go for it.
yeah, it's a fascinating subject. And so as a background to that, you would look at something like Moneyball,
Yeah,
which was the story of in the States where a coach and a data analytics team entered basketball, and the coach was very open-minded. So they would try to find stats that could explain why a baseball player was better than somebody else. And obviously in America, there's a lot of the idea of, oh, he looks like an athlete, or he throws the ball well by how he
yeah.
looks. But the stats might not have backed that up. And so they broke it down, and they took a very low-lying team to really outperform themselves by signing players that other teams
Yeah,
didn't
it's one of
want
the great
because of
sports
that.
films and stories actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
So it's an incredible story. And then the success of baseball, the guy Billy Bean in baseball as a coach, it then led to people talking about, well, how can you do that in football? And it's a little bit harder in football than baseball, because baseball is a very static game with repeated plays where
Yeah,
you can have stats that are set out. Whereas in football, the game is very fluid. So, you can say, oh, somebody had 400 touches, but that doesn't really tell you much about what they did in the game,
yeah.
whether those touches were positive. The same with passes. You can have lots of passes, but if they're all sideways and backwards, it might not be beneficial for your team. So it's
But
within
again, it might
football.
be as well if that's your role.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it can be, and that's what's very hard to distinguish. For example, the centre back winning a lot of headers is great, but it doesn't matter where the ball goes to. But if you're a centre mid and you keep heading the ball away and heading the ball back to the other team, that matters.
yeah,
So you need to really break it down. So there's lots of data scientists that are working on those things, and Football Hackers just goes into some of the stats they're looking at, how that's developed, who's using it at the moment, what sort of successes they're having. It's really interesting.
yeah. And the thing that really gets me is there was one instance where every time that they sent a scout report to youth games, it was always the blonde-haired blue eyed kid that they would send back as,
Uh-huh.
yeah, he played really well. But it's because
Mm.
it's rare. It's that rarity that it catches the eye. And then when you're
Yeah.
leaving, you go, I can't remember the rest of them because they all look the same. Kind of like
Yeah.
a weird, almost racism in a way, isn't it, against normal colored haired
Yeah.
people? And then you had this idea that, oh, there's just loads of that particular kind of player that gets picked up, and it's always a big strong one as well. Oh, he was
Yeah.
strong in the tackle, whereas he might have been less gifted than someone who looked more average. This
Yeah.
looked more average, didn't play so average. So it's crazy how these things are entrenched within society, and it's not just in football as well either.
Yeah. It happens a lot, and as you say, it's not just football, but within football, kind of you have personal experience of it, and then you also see it reenacted time and time again. People, it's very easy to pick up the very rapid player.
Yeah.
He's fast, and you see that explosiveness. This, let's say somebody like Cesc Fabregas. How would you pick that up, especially in new football? Like, okay, this guy is not particularly quick, he's not particularly tall, he's not particularly strong, but he thinks of the game 3 steps ahead of everybody else.
Mm,
And that's a very subtle thing to pick up. And he was fortunate that he was at Barcelona and they picked that up.
yeah, yeah. It's all nuance, and I think that's what makes people love sports and things like that, because especially at football, there's so many ways you can play, and you have to have different attributes for different ways of playing. So there's no right or wrong way, but there might be a right
Yeah.
or wrong way for the particular system and situation.
Yeah, exactly. And it depends on your team, on what they need, and that might be the right player for you.
Are you struggling right now?
So I've got like something stuck in my throat. I think I'm keep trying to drink water, but it's just staying there.
We'll give you a sec. We'll give you a sec. We'll start to wrap up pretty soon. Actually, we've done an hour and a half,
Mm.
so I know you've got work tomorrow, so I don't want to take too much time up.
Yeah, my Sunday evening.
Um, if you would start your own podcast, who would the 3 guests that you would bring on be,
Oh,
and why?
I think.
And can I say something before we give these answers? Because everybody always gives me the Obama, and oh, I'd have Mandela on, and stuff like that, because they're
Uh-huh.
inspirational. But I'm the kind of person who would rather bring on the villains,
Uh-huh.
because I
That's
think
quite
that's a more
interesting.
interesting. I think everyone's already heard the success stories, or the good stories.
Yeah.
Not everyone's heard the psychopath speak. Not that you want them to give them a platform. Some of these people might be dead or whatever, but I think it's fascinating. People are fascinated by true crime that same way.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's true. So you could look at something like that and say, oh, I'd you'd bring on like the Jack the Ripper or something like that to try and figure out why he did it or who he was.
Yeah, like how did he get away
You
with
could
it,
do
or
that.
like what, or if someone actually got away with all these crimes, and you go, all right, I want the guy who did X. We
Mm.
don't know who it is, and then you can try and work out,
Yeah.
okay, how the heck did this guy just manage to sneak away and get away with it all?
Yeah, I mean, so you have that with Jack the Ripper. Like
Mm.
nobody really knows who did it. There's lots of theories on who it was, and so you could, figure out how did he get away with it. So there's rumors that it was I forget which royal, but it was some member of the royal family. There were rumors that was Jack the Ripper because that's the only way they could have got away with it. So it's quite interesting. Never
Mm.
confirmed. I'm not making accusations about the royal
Who's
family.
Andrew's dad?
Yeah,
To be
I
honest,
don't know. But
having seen recent
yeah,
allegations and things that's happened.
yeah,
So yeah. Okay, so
yeah.
your
You never
three,
know. So did you say that they can be dead
yeah,
as
it's
well?
just yeah.
Okay.
We're opening it up.
So the first. Well, I mean, I'm sorry. Like I know you've just asked me to go for the sort of
I was
criminals
broadening
and
your horizons before you gave me the cliche answers.
so I mean the first person would be I'd choose
Yeah, I
Arsene
knew that was
Wenger
coming.
because he's alive.
I wouldn't mind having him on, actually,
Um,
because he's a very interesting guy.
yeah, I mean he's an incredible guy, knows a lot about everything, an incredible character as well, and the way he saw his role within football, the way he he lived his life according to his principles. I would find that fascinating. I just feel, I can listen to his press conferences, and even now when he speaks, I could listen to it for hours.
Yeah, and he did a degree in
So
economics, didn't he?
he did,
Which
yeah.
is very different to a lot of the other guys on the circuit, shall we say?
Yeah, so he had an unusual history in terms of how he ended up in football. Coming from a small town, ended up playing professional football in League One, but also went to study and did a degree in economics, and then got into coaching. So he had such a different perspective from everybody else, and that made him a successful coach in a way.
Yeah. So yeah, I think he would be really, really interesting, and his philosophy on a lot of things would be very interesting to hear about. Who's number 2 then?
So number 2, which is now that you've allowed me to have people who have unfortunately passed away, the second person would be Tupac.
Oh yeah.
So you probably would have guessed that if you've seen like any of my stories, but I mean, it's hard to explain, but like Tupac for me was a massive part of my life in terms of allowing me to develop as the person that I was when I was like 12, 13, 14, helping me deal with some of the issues that I went through at that age, and also like showing me that certain things were allowed. You could still be a man. Like I used to write poetry because my sister wrote poetry. And at 13, I used to think this is not, like, guys don't do this. This is not a manly thing. And then when I found out Tupac wrote poetry, it's like, well, hey, if the most gangster rapper in the world can do it, then I can do it. And that's been, we talk about emotions and coping mechanisms. Like, poetry has been massive in my life for being able to do that.
That's interesting you say that, because traditionally the people who would write a lot of the poetry, in classical terms, would be men.
Yeah. But I think it's more of like when you're in school, it's all who's the alpha male, who's the best footballer, who's the strongest.
So again, it's
the
modern
fastest.
world has shaken things up into a weird way.
Whereas, like you say, most of the famous sort of poets in that way are men, but you don't have that perspective. Poetry was like a bit of a girly thing, and you wouldn't expect. I didn't know anybody else that was doing that. And guys would write raps, but they wouldn't write poems. So it's just interesting. Whereas Tupac started off writing poetry, and he started writing raps from that.
And number 3, because I think you're really falling off a cliff here with your throat.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this thing. I think I'm allergic to this microphone. So number 3 would be Ayrton Senna.
Oh yeah.
Who again is a fascinating character. It'd be nice to have actually all 3 of them in a room and just see what they would talk about, because Senna was an amazing racing driver, but he was very enigmatic.
That's the word I was thinking of in my head. Actually, I didn't say it, but yeah,
and incredibly skillful, and incredibly driven as a driver, but also set up a foundation in Brazil to try to improve and to resolve poverty.
Yeah.
And was very outspoken in terms of politics and what he wanted. So
really interesting. I need to watch Senna. Actually, I've not. Some reason I didn't feel like watching it. Because of the crash and everything else that happened, I'm just like, I don't want to watch through something sad. I'm someone who, if I'm watching something, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna have something that I know has got a nice happy ending, so I don't have to worry about it, and I don't have to have a bad feeling towards the end or anything. So, a bit of a worse in that way, I suppose.
I thoroughly recommend it. I mean, it's a brilliantly done movie, and it shows so much about him, his life, how he developed. He's just a fascinating character.
Yeah. So I think we'll call it there before you can no longer do any phone consults tomorrow.
Exactly, before I lose my voice.
Thank you for coming on. Oh, we've got one last comment. So thank you for the comment, Asfia. Your inspiration to many Indian youngsters here. Because of them, many have given up. Because most of them have given up or sacrificed passion to become a doctor. Not everyone knows or is aware of balancing both like you are doing. And that's probably towards you, because I've got no balance in my life whatsoever. So, yeah.
I've seen your gym posts. You do work out, so that's good.
Yeah, have you
No,
seen me
it's
sucking in
always
while I'm
good.
doing it?
No, I've been quite intrigued by how you do your videos, though. That you do lots of different angles with them.
Yeah,
So,
I think the thing that lockdown's given me, and I'll do more than speaking now because you've done your fair
yeah, my
share.
voice has gone.
It's lockdown's allowed me to do all these different weird things that
Uh-huh.
I think I've got an eye for that I haven't been able to do from time and working very hard and having a target. So
Hmm.
clever transitions in video. So I did one for my friend's burger place a while back, a couple of weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
Went to pick up a takeaway and I did a quick sequence. It took me less than a minute's worth of filming and 5 minutes
Uh-huh.
of editing to get it in, so it was like a little sequence. But it's been on the back of watching a couple of hundred hours on YouTube of how to do these things
Yeah.
and how to make them look right. Because I know I want to do it and I know I can probably do it. But having the time to go and sit down and go, okay, I can just put everything else aside and go, this is how I set up a live stream on YouTube now. Okay, I can do that, tick that off. I don't think about that now. The next thing for me is how do I make adverts and videos and advertorials and interesting things that are going to help me in the career or I can do for other people
Yeah.
or just for fun, travel vlogs. How do I shoot something? Because I went to Sri Lanka a while back, and I took some video and it was shocking. I didn't
Uh-huh.
use any of it, none of it,
Really?
because all the stuff that was in camera was just weird angles, and it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
There was some nice stuff from the drone, which unfortunately got nicked, but that's just another story.
Oh, did
That's a
it?
story for another day.
Oh, man.
But those were much better because I had an idea and I'd watched hundreds of hours, and this is how you take a drone video if you're going on holiday, and there was a nice video for that. But
Yeah.
doing it with the camera in your hand, and it's
Uh-huh.
much different because really you need it's a three-man job.
Uh-huh.
So there are ways you can do it on your own, but I wasn't quite plucked.
Yeah, I mean, because you see some great shots, for example, of like a couple sitting there, and then the drone just flies away from them and shows the whole
Yeah.
scene. But so the one of them would have to have the controls for the drone and be doing that, or you have, like you say, a third person who does the drone while they
Yeah.
pose.
So yeah, there are things you can do like waypoints. So you're telling the drone what to do on a timer,
Uh-huh.
and then you run to get your spot, and then you'll be sat there on the edge of a cliff, and then the drone does its thing, and then you got to run back to the control, which you've hidden under a rock or something, so you can't see it, and then
Yeah.
you can get nice stuff like that. But it's much more difficult on your own, because you don't want to crash into trees and branches and stuff. So
Yeah.
but that's something for another day. I'd have to get a new drone, which I don't have the cash for right now.
Yeah. You're spending your savings just living.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's what you want UBI for, right?
yeah,
So you can-
exactly. Then that's all good. We'll enjoy things. So yeah,
Yeah, it is interesting though, like you say, because it's the time that you can put into these things. Like I wanted to do more photography for a
yeah,
while, and I did buy a camera, but investing the time in then figuring out how you adjust things, how you make the picture clearer, what settings to put things on, that's just a whole nother process, you know?
yeah. I mean, this you can point and shoot, but
Uh-huh.
that's. I sound really like up myself, but that's not photography.
Yeah.
Because everyone can buy a nice camera, but there's some guys that have the same camera as you in the same software, and you're just like,
Yeah.
what is that? And what is this rubbish I'm
Yeah.
doing? So it's a learning process, and obviously the more time you put into these things, the better you get. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people have, and it's weird. Lockdown's done this. Some people have really improved their mental health during lockdown because they've gone away and wanted to do lots and lots of things. And now they've had time to work out how to integrate these things in their life. And other people have gone the other way
Yeah.
because maybe in more dire straits, people who are maybe on the poverty line struggling now because of it. So it's very
Yeah.
strange how this has affected very different sections of society very differently.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible actually. I could do that.
Anyway, mate,
Yeah.
before you
All right.
literally fall off a cliff with your throat, thank you for coming on.
It's been a
Guys,
pleasure.
this has been Lewis Akindele. You can see his Instagram at on screen, so make sure to go follow him and see what he's up to, see what books he's reading. I'm sure we'll have another catch up at some point because I think this has been pretty
Yeah.
interesting. And if
Uh-huh.
you send me some
I
of
hope so.
the Kindle recommendations, I'll get through some of them as well, so I can
I will do it.
actually know something and not just BS my way through it, essentially.
That's it.
Um,
No, it's
Make
good.
sure to follow Lewis. If you are not already, make sure to subscribe, like the video. I can see there's 15 of you guys on here already. We've got 6 likes, so I'm sure we can get a few more likes on here. Subscribe if you're new, and if you enjoy the stuff that I'm doing on Instagram, on the YouTube, head over to the Patreon group, and that's where you can help me on the channel and buy little microphones like this and signs like that. So if you'd like to help out with the channel, have a little look at that, and there's a bunch of nice little extras for you guys in there as well, so have a little look, guys, and let me know what you think. This has been Lewis Akindele. Make sure to come back tomorrow. We have got a young foundation dentist, I believe, called Drew Thanky. He's going to be talking to us about a bunch of things as well, and he was requested by one of the audience, so whoever you are, make sure you can get in there and ask Drew all the questions you wanted to. That's it for tonight, guys. Thank you for joining us.